Hi, it's Davey Mooney coming to you from the University of North Texas, where I run the jazz guitar program. Benedetto artist, Sunnyside Records artist, got my Sunnyside CDs up here, and there's a new one on the way. I've got two Mel Bay books. There's the brand new Into the Labyrinth, An Anatomy of Position Playing for Jazz Guitar, and my previous book, Personalizing Jazz Vocabulary. And getting ready to start the semester over here at UNT, so it's a very busy time, very exciting time. Really looking forward to the start and working with everybody. But I wanted to talk today about something a little different. I usually in these videos I take a song, kind of a hard modern jazz song, and explore my approach to the harmony and the approach I take to playing on the tune. Today I want to talk about a scale, and that's the augmented scale. And when I say the augmented scale, I know jazz terminology is, sometimes you have different names for the same concept, and then if you get into the classical realm, they might have different names and a whole different interpretation of a certain concept or a certain scale. So when I say the augmented scale, I'm referring to the hexatonic, the 6-note augmented scale. Like for instance, if I say B augmented scale, what I mean is the notes of a B augmented or triad, and then the notes a half step below that. So you end up with a 6-note scale. So for me, B augmented would be like B, D natural, D sharp, F sharp, G, A sharp. And yeah, it's a really cool scale. It's symmetrical, and it's a mode of limited transposition. It's not one of the Messiaen modes for some reason. I was doing a little digging on that, trying to figure out why it's not. And there's a Wikipedia page, and there's many resources that go into that are way beyond the scope of this video. But that scale, there are only so the B augmented scale is the same as the E flat augmented scale, and it's the same as the G augmented scale. So there's only four of them, unique pitches, sets of pitches of that scale, kind of like the half-whole diminished scale, but that's another video. And I want to talk a little bit about my history with this scale. As I often do, I don't think these videos aren't meant to be comprehensive. I'm not going to say anything about Oliver Nelson or Michael Brecker, except for just talking about them, because I know they use the scale as well. But yeah, I've talked about my own personal relationship with it and my own history with the scale. And I'll see where we go with that. So I remember the first I heard about this, and the reason I picked the B augmented scale, it's when I was in high school down in New Orleans. I took a guitar ensemble class at the University of New Orleans with the great Steve Baskowski, one of my mentors. And I remember him talking, I don't remember why we were talking about giant steps. I mean, if you're in a jazz class, you're probably going to end up talking about giant steps a lot. But he was talking about how one approach to playing on that harmony is to just kind of generalize and play the B augmented scale through the whole thing, which of course is the same as the G augmented scale, same as the E flat augmented scale, and those happen to be the three key areas of the tune, right? B, E flat, and G. You have that augmented triad that divides the octave evenly. And yeah, it's really interesting. It works. It sounds a little bit, I guess exotic is the term that comes to mind, if I can use that term. But yeah, if you look at, there's those two augmented triads right next to each other, right? The B augmented and the B flat augmented. And that scale also contains some major triads, like B major triad, E flat major triad, and G major triad in there too. So that's the three key areas of the tune. And so when I play on it, I feel like I use that scale more on giant steps on the first 8 bars or so, where the chords move at a faster clip, where you get the harmonic rhythm is like 2 beats per chord. But yeah, it just has kind of an interesting sound, and I'm going to go ahead and play a few choruses. I usually play at the end of these videos, but I'm going to put this right in the middle and play a few choruses on giant steps, and I'm going to try to combine this augmented scale sound with my usual sort of bop vocabulary. So check it out. it's an interesting sound, right? It sounds, I'm going to say exotic again. I got to come up with a better vocabulary term. But it fits, and then it gives you this, it's a different flavor, right? It's a different seasoning to the song and to the harmony. And one other thing that I find kind of interesting, yes, there's the B triad, the E flat major triad, the G triad. And then when you're thinking about in terms of like 5/1s, I find it kind of interesting that, like, for instance, so a B triad obviously works on a B major chord, but on a D7, a B triad gives you a kind of a 13 flat 9 sound, right? Which I usually associate with the diminished scale, with the half-whole diminished scale. So that, if you stay playing a B triad on a D7 going to G, that's kind of a altered dominant somewhat. And then, so then an E flat major triad, if you think about an F sharp 13 flat 9, that has an E flat triad in it that would take you to B. So they kind of work on the dominance as well. And of course, a G triad gives you, a B flat 7, a B flat 13 flat 9 that takes you to E flat. So, yeah, there's a lot of information in that scale, and it's kind of a chameleon, sort of like the half-whole diminished scale. And I like using it. And before, I'm going to talk about some different applications that I use, places where I use that scale kind of as a substitute for melodic minor. But one thing that I think is good to talk about, there's another John Coltrane song called One Down, One Up that I studied as part of Brad Shepik's excellent improv class at NYU when I was getting my PhD. And it's interesting because, it's a few years after Giant Steps. I think they recorded that in like 63 or something. There's a studio recording with Roy Haynes instead of Elvin. That's really cool. And it's that scale, it's that same scale. It's what I would call the B augmented scale, a B augmented triad and a B flat augmented triad together, but the bass is playing B flat as kind of like the root. So it made me wonder, like, well, I'm calling it B augmented. Maybe it's B flat augmented, and the augmented scale is the augmented triad, and the augmented triad a half step above. And yeah, I don't know. That's kind of I try to not think about it too much, because then I get confused and upset. But that song is really cool. It's like an AABA tune where kind of like impressions, but instead of Dorian scales, it's augmented scales. So you have this B augmented scale with the B flat in the bass for the first two A's, and then the bridge is like an A augmented scale, but Jimmy Garrison's playing A flat in the bass. But it's really cool, and I transcribed. Remember, our assignment was to transcribe that solo, the Trane solo, and I think I did about 4 choruses of it, and then it gets real saxophonic, real kind of like false fingerings and whatever they call it in saxophone land. And it didn't seem to be that helpful when it got to that point, but just some really cool exploration of that sound. And it's funny, right, because it's kind of the same scale as Giant Steps, or that we were saying you could apply on Giant Steps. So I don't know, Trane was definitely into some deep harmony. So that's a couple uses of the augmented scale. Another way, like I was just saying, some melodic minor applications. And I was thinking about this a lot because I recently did a video on Dance Cadaverous, the Wayne Shorter song. And I was pointing out that Herbie, excuse me, like the first chord of that tune, B minor major 7 to C minor major 7. On Herbie's solo, he goes, on the B minor, he plays these pitches, C sharp, D, F, F sharp, A sharp, which is kind of like a augmented scale application. It doesn't have all the pitches, but it's clearly not melodic minor, right? Melodic minor, B melodic minor would be one option, and it doesn't have an F natural in it. Again, though, you don't always have to conceive of things in terms of scales. That's kind of a way to simplify, I think, the education aspect of it. We can just say it's this scale here and chord scale theory, which is one way to conceive of it. So maybe Herbie was just thinking, okay, it's a B minor major 7. I'm going to play some chromatic approaches to the arpeggio of the chord. And sometimes that augmented scale, the way I finger it, if I go back to the one from Giant Steps, I'm kind of seeing that there's a triad right there. So it's almost like the way I'm fingering it is I'm approaching something from a half step below. this is the augmented, I'm just going. So it has that sort of chromatic approach feel to it, even though we're conceptualizing it as a scale. So anyway, so Herbie plays on the minor major 7 chord, he plays what I would call the D augmented scale. Oops, I always do that. You could do that too. That's a different note, but so you can think in terms of say coming up with a formula to figure out how to get to that sound on a certain chord. So on a minor major 7 chord, you can say, okay, on the 3rd of the chord, I'm going to play an augmented sound. And of course, because of the symmetrical nature of it, you could, I mean, that's the same as saying on the 5th, right? Because the 3rd of B minor major 7 is D, and the D augmented triad is identical to an F sharp augmented triad, and it's also identical to an A sharp augmented triad. So yeah, you could say like, all right, well, you play an augmented scale on the 3rd, the 5th, or the 7th. So maybe you could just pick one. So I kind of think the 3rd, you know, just to make it easier on myself. And I kind of see it there like an arpeggio. And again, I'm kind of just approaching it by half steps like that. And then he goes up a half step. The next chord in the song is a C minor major 7, so he goes up a half step and does the same thing. I think on the 3rd A or the 2nd A of the song, I don't remember, you can listen to the solo. It's only one chorus, but it's in there. And so some other applications, maybe from that song too, there's one point where there's a B flat dominant 7, you know, sharp 5, sharp 9, and you could play augmented scale on the root of that, right? B flat itself, because you know B flat augmented works great. I've talked in a bunch of videos how much I like the sound of an augmented triad on an alter dominant chord. So you're just approaching it by half step. So that's an application on an alter dominant. You can see how you could even get a 2-5-1 out of it, you know, something like that if you made the B flat go to E flat, major or minor. And let's see, what's another one? So on a minor 7 flat 5 chord, so like in Dance Cadaverous, you have C sharp minor 7 flat 5. When you have a natural 9, I mean a melodic minor application might be playing E melodic minor off the 3rd. And it's a nice sound because you get the sort of, I think they call that Locrian sharp 2, so you get that natural 9 along with the flat 5. So that's a nice sound. Augmented scale as well, you could think about on the 3rd of the chord. So on the like an E augmented scale over a C sharp minor 7 flat 5 with a natural 9. Man, it's hard not to make a mistake sometimes in the guys when I'm saying all these so many sharps and flats and things. So I hope I said that right. So that's a cool sound. So if you're playing the song. Trying to apply that idea over the first 4 chords of that song. You know, B minor major 7, play in D augmented scale. C minor major 7, play in an E flat augmented scale, and on C minor 7 flat 5, playing the E augmented scale, and then on the F sharp dominant, playing the F sharp augmented, which is actually the same, right, as the B minor one, and harmonically. What's another one? Let's see. If you have a dominant 7 sharp 11 sound, like say you had C9 sharp 11, you know, the melodic minor application would be the Lydian dominant scale, right? So C9 sharp 11, you could play G melodic minor, right? But again, you got that within that chord, you have an F sharp augmented. So you could play the augmented scale, F sharp augmented scale. So like an F sharp triad, augmented triad, and all the notes a half step below that. So you could think, okay, on the flat 5, I'll play it, and I kind of just visually, I can see where that is in the chord, you know, because sometimes I'll play the, I'm always trying to play augmented triads on chords because I just like the sound of it, and I like how it lays on the guitar, you know, how you can go like, oops, not like that, you know, in that instance, you know. I talk about that fingering in the new book as well. So let's see, is that everything? Oh yeah, one more would be, say if you had a major 7 sharp 5 chord, like say you had an A major 7 sharp 5, that's a nice sound. Just playing it off the root, you know, it's an A major 7 sharp 5, I'm playing an A augmented scale. So, yeah, really cool. So the way I use it in my day-to-day improvisation is kind of a next level of dissonance, say, from melodic minor harmony, which I sort of came up on and sounds very correct to me in a way. It seems like the right scale for that sound, and then the augmented scale gives you some notes that kind of sound chromatic and maybe some wrong notes actually, right? Like on a C, on the C9 sharp 11, you play F sharp augmented scale, right, you're getting an F natural, which is kind of technically maybe a no-no because the chord has a sharp 11, but it sounds cool, right? And you have a, what is that, a D flat. So anyway, it's a scale I really like, so, and I've used it on giant steps and as a substitute for some melodic minor applications, and I'm sure there's a lot more information out there and examples of people using the scale, but I encourage you to experiment with it and check it out. All right.